Am I also recording on this multi-track?
Well, I took the first pass fail, but I ended up getting a 95 in, and I waited too long to ask people what they had. Without trying, I mean, it was an economics course. I was just trying to like learn something.
Okay, can I go back? Yeah. How are the coffee and snakes?
And it's currently on. So.
Thank you.
Have fun.
Thanks.
Yeah, they'll come up here.
Oh my God. What's your move?
Yeah, I'll Oh, so
Yes,
Hello, everyone. Welcome, and welcome to the 2025 Mullins Lecture, Distinguished Lecture, organized by the STS department here at Virginia Tech. The Mullins Lecture was instituted in 1989 in honor of the late distinguished sociologist of science and VT Professor Nicholas C. Mullins. He was an internationally recognized scholar in STS and social theory, and a founding member, past president, and executive board member of our disciplinary society, the Society for the Social Studies of Science. Today, we have the honor of having Dr. Max Liboiron delivering the distinguished lecture. Dr. Max Liboiron is a professor of geography at Memorial University in Canada and directs the Civic Laboratory for Environmental Action Research, CLARE, which is an interdisciplinary lab known for developing anti-colonial research methods and equitable models of collective research. Their work has shaped national policy on plastics and indigenous research, while also inventing technologies, measures, and protocols for community-based plastics monitoring. Dr. Liboiron is the author of the award-winning book, Pollution is Colonialism, published by the Duke Press in 2021, and is one of the foundational texts for most of our students here in the department. They have also co-authored another book titled Discarded Studies, Wasting Systems and Power, published by MIT Press in 2022. They served as the inaugural Associate Vice President for Indigenous Research at the Memorial University, where their team implemented a groundbreaking policy on early-stage collective consent for indigenous groups impacted by research. Currently, Dr. Liboiron co-directs the IndigeLab Network, which supports Indigenous-led research collectives across Canada, the United States, Nigeria, and Aotearoa. Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together for Dr. Max Liboiron.
All right, can everyone hear me? I can only see John. John, can you hear me? Oh, now I can't see anyone. Yeah, okay, great. Thank you, John, Lyndon, Janet, all the people who helped me be here today insofar as I am here virtually. As John said, my name is Max Liboiron. My pronouns are they, them. I am Michif, or Red River Métis, as well as white settler from Treaty 6 territory, which is in Canada, a place called Lac La Biche. I have a map for you of where that is. Oh, so this is Canada. Oh, this is where I'm from. I'm here speaking here today mostly as a scientist who does community-based plastic monitoring, including the case I'm going to be talking about today, which is through a partnership with the Nunat Civic government, which has run for almost a decade, and that's over here. This is the province of Newfoundland and Labrador, and that's where Nunat Civic is. And I show you this map and these locations because I don't do research in my homelands, and that's really important because Indigenous, for this in general and for this presentation in particular, because Indigenous is not really interchangeable with Métis or Inuit. Oops, other direction. Métis or Inuit. It's like weather people. Everything's backwards. It's really hard. So yeah, Indigenous is not like one group of people. I work in a university, Memorial University, as an academic with a wet lab, and I was specifically brought into plastic pollution monitoring with Nunat Civic as an academic scientist. Nunat Civic already has lots of traditional knowledge holders, including ones with degrees. They have people in professional research positions. So they didn't need me as an Indigenous person. They needed me as an academic scientist. So I'm going to start with a few caveats because I think these caveats are actually quite foundational to what I'm going to talk about. One, as I've already said, is I am not giving this talk primarily as an Indigenous person with Indigenous knowledge, but as a Western scientist who happens to be Indigenous. Number two, this is not going to be a tale of integrating Western and Indigenous sciences because I don't think they integrate ever. So if you believe in scientific paradigms like Thomas Kuhn's scientific revolution paradigms, and that scientists can't even speak sensibly across paradigms because what is sensible, what counts as true, what counts as logic are actually so different. Well, then Indigenous and Western knowledges are even more different because not only do they not share epistemology, they do not share ontology, they do not share cosmology, they do not share axiology. I don't think they have almost anything in common. And so there will never be a shift, a paradigm shift, whereby Western science is indigenized like there is in scientific paradigms. So that means what I'm going to tell you today is a tale of coordinated and committed collaboration across incommensurate systems that are joined in a way that may not or may be a common goal, but we often can't tell because paradigms. So not surprisingly, we fuck up a lot, and I'm here to tell you about some of those mistakes. Caveat number 3. I'm going to talk about quantitative research, statistics in particular. And I do not want to imply that quantitative knowledge and numbers is on the side of Western science and not Indigenous knowledges. Because it is only through colonial bullshit that Indigenous has come to be synonymous with the opposite of quantitative and vice versa, right? That Indigenous peoples are not numerical peoples because that, it's a higher form of reasoning that could only ever have been introduced. That's not true. I'm not going to give you a lesson in like historical ethnomathematics. Those do exist. You can go pursue them because, of course, many Indigenous peoples have histories, methods, philosophies of numeracy. So instead, the premise is the negotiation between incommensurate knowledge systems through the case of quantitative, through numbers, basically. So I'm going to introduce you a little bit to the case in Nunatsiavut because context is pretty important. It turns out both Indigenous knowledges and statistics are extremely relational and extremely context dependent. So we need that context. Then I'm going to dig into the sort of story of trying to count plastics. It sounds super easy. A plastic, 1. Another plastic, 2. Another plastic, 3. That is actually not what happened, and it's way harder than that. And interwoven into some of that are some more STS type concepts and methods for thinking across incommensurate knowledge systems, especially while ensuring they don't get conflated. So yeah. Let's giddy up. All right, so another map. I'm in a geography department. Now I have these like mandatory maps. So this is where Nunatsiavut is. The inset is a big chunk of North America and Greenland. The shaded area is the land claim area of Nunatsiavut. So since 2017 and ending in 2026, I've been doing plastic monitoring in this region with my research partner, Liz Piugi. Liz is Inuk. These are her homelands. She is the Northern Contaminants researcher for the Nunatsiavut government. And so we work together in all things. Here, I'll try and line up with myself. So it's like Liz is giving me a presentation cuddle. So usually when I present this work, Liz and I always present it together. That's actually part of our contract, that when we present on the monitoring project, we present it together. However, I'm not actually presenting on the monitoring project today. I'm talking about an academic problem which arose from the project, which Liz is really not invested in. She's not invested in academic problems, and I don't blame her. So Nunatsiavut governments and what Liz works on is a lot of sophisticated research and monitoring programs. They have one of the only Inuit-led research stations in the Arctic. Actually, Nunatsiavut government does. They monitor oil spills, bird migrations, caribou populations, and enough contaminants that they can have like a full-time position like Liz, who only does contaminants research. And early on, our collaboration was, this is a little bit creepy, so I'm just going to switch back to the map. Okay, so early on, our collaboration was characterized in a way that a lot of academic community partnerships are characterized in science, which is through a land-lab divide, where Liz and community members designed the sampling and all the like land and water based work. She designed what and where and when things were sampled. She then sent the samples to me and I worked in the lab, processed the samples, crunched the numbers. Then I brought the numbers back to Nunatsiavut for a sort of report back and figuring out next steps together. That's pretty common. It stopped working. And I'll tell you the story of how it stopped working. Now, as it stopped working, we moved into what we now characterize as a really robust form of co-analysis, which I'll explain. But it means that we now involve community members at every part of analysis. It's not like we have a land lab divide anymore. And it's gotten to the point where in our last report, this is our last community report on plastics research, This is the authors list. There are 233 authors, and the vast majority of them are community members. So it's actually, it is taking 5 villages. That's how many communities are in Nunatsiavut. It takes a lot of people to produce the type of knowledge and the type of analysis that I'll be talking about. So the number one sort of research area that we do in plastics monitoring in Nunatsiavut is that we monitor wild food for plastics. That's because community said we're most concerned about plastics in wild food. This is Arctic char or Aotearoa. Aotearoa is the Inuktitut term. We also do ring seal or nutset. We do a range of birds. We did scallops the other day. Super hard to find the digestive tract of a scallop, by the way. These sorts of animals. And just an FYI, ring seals are not a threatened species in this area. They're very plentiful. Someone always asks me that. It is okay to eat seal here. So if you are a Western scientist, there is plastic ingestion in animals is also a priority. And so there's like actually quite a lot of science around it. And there's a fairly universal method for figuring it out. And it's not super hard. It's called frequency of occurrence. So frequency of occurrence, we're going to learn about a statistic. It's super easy. Frequency of occurrence just means the percent of animals that you sampled that ate plastic. So this is a picture of, a picture of 10 fish. 1, 2, 3, yes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 10 fish. 3 of them have check marks indicating that they ate plastics. 3 out of 10 is 30%. They have a 30% frequency of occurrence. So it's actually a very simple math. It's a very simple calculation. It's like the number of fish that were wrong on it. No, I'm not going to do that. No. So I did this calculation and I went up into community multiple times and told them the frequency of occurrence for different animals. And for years, people politely nodded and talked and off we went. And then one day in a meeting with all of the different land and natural resources staff, of which Liz is a member, she said, okay, well, what's the breakdown of frequency of occurrence, plastic ingestion by month? But she said by season, and I didn't have seasonal data, so month. So I ran the numbers. And this is the graph that popped out. So the bottom is month. It starts in April and it goes to September, each little tab. You can see 39% is the first tab. It's the orange at the bottom of the graph is like the frequency of occurrence for that month, 39 to 32 to 19, 17, 14, 36. And the thing about different numbers and statistics is that you have to see so most of the char is caught in this season in April and May. This is ice breakup, so ice fishing. This is ice fishing. And then again, a little bit in September, but not so much are caught in the summer. And so I ran Z tests, if people care about those, to see whether these numbers were actually different or if when you compared them to the number of fish, whether it's just by chance that these numbers are different. And the statistics said these are essentially the same number. There's no actual statistically significant change between these seasons. And so I told everyone in the room, there is no change in frequency occurrence by month. And Liz said, bullshit. And I said, would you like a follow-up with that? Like, why? And she said, well, in the this month here, this is May, there's actually, that's when the ice breakup happens and the ice is melting and the char are coming out from the lakes and they're sea run char. So they come out from the lakes where they've been hibernating all winter. They kind of hibernate. And then they go into the ocean and the ocean is filthy because everything that's been stored in the ice all winter has melted. So it's the water is murky. There's all this stuff floating around and the char are super hungry because they haven't eaten in months. So they're eating like gangbusters. So something's wrong. So I reran my numbers and I ended up with this. Oops. Oh, look, this is when the ice breaks up. And so instead of looking at frequency of occurrence, I just counted the number of plastics eaten. So you see a huge spike here. And the stats said, yeah, there's a difference here. So, but I said, Liz, you just can't trust these numbers, because you catch more fish in these seasons. So I have to correct it for the number of fish you caught. I have to correct it for the sample size. And she said, do you? And I was like, of course I do. And I was like, wait, do I? And a crisis began. So I'm going to give an STS version of the crisis as opposed to an experiential version of the crisis, which I might also talk a bit about. But an STSE version of or a researchy STSE version of the crisis has to do with how you do research. So none of us directly observe the thing we're interested in knowing about. If you study colonialism, which I often do, you never walk along and find colonialism sitting on a rock, or you never find, I don't know, queer theories of change growing on a tree, and you can just pluck it and like, oh look, here it is. Instead, we piece, colonialism together through like a bunch of other things like archival documents, literature, interviews, images, case studies. In my case, plastics and fish. And one of the things you can call this, the things you look at in order to study, is proxies. There's other terms for it: index, theoretical conceit, ontological proxy. If you've got a big STS vocabulary theory pocket, I'm actually talking about something that's different than a heuristic or an epistemic object. We can talk about that in the Q&A if you really want. But there are various things you can call this. And then this is the thing you're researching. And the question of how they're related is a very real question that all researchers have to deal with. And yeah, and moving from here to here, it might be just like what research is. So the question for me at this moment was not just what is the relationship between my proxy, which is plastics and fish, to the thing we're researching, but what am I researching? What do plastics and char actually mean? Because I don't know what Liz wants. I don't know what they want. They didn't want frequency of occurrence. That wasn't doing for it. So through lots of conversations, I was getting the impression that they really cared about the fish. Like, how are the fish? Not just fish in general. So the thing about frequency of occurrence is that it's a population measure. Hang on, I'll go back to us here. It's a population measure. It comes from ecology. Ecology mainly cares about population, like all the char in Nunatsiavut, or all the char that move as a school in Nunatsiavut, because that's what matters to an ecosystem. An ecosystem is a very specific description of environment that is also ecology. So it's sort of like ecology turtles the whole way down. It can do things like tell you the presence of plastic in the population. It can tell you whether or not a species ingests plastics at all, the sort of prevalence. Frequency of occurrences tend to be fairly stable. So it's supposed to be a proxy for environment-animal relationships. But Liz was saying no. That wasn't actually what she was asking about. And it's not because my frequency of occurrence was wrong, because they weren't wrong. It was that the meaning of this was not meeting her needs. The frequency of occurrence was not a good proxy, basically. So I tried to think about, and she doesn't speak statistics and she doesn't speak science, so she just couldn't tell me, which is the other issue. So I tried to be like, okay, you care about fishes. So I did this data visualization and I showed it to a couple of Inuit, which is basically like, here's a frequency of occurrence and look, there are fishes. And they didn't like it because this is basically just frequency occurrence in an infographic drag, where it's still frequency of occurrence, it's still a frequency of occurrence draft, but I've just put pictures of fish. So that was a fail. And rightfully so, because it was really hard for me to switch my brain. And so more talking with more community. And again, people cared about like, what about this fish over there? And what about the fish in this season? What about this? And they actually were talking about very different things all the time. I couldn't turn it into one thing. So I ended up doing this infographic instead. This is a detail of this infographic. So this is, I don't know, 75 fish. And what I did was each fish icon is a real fish in the study. And it says where they were from, Nain Bay, when they were caught. And the picture includes, this has two thread, long, skinny plastics in it. One is gray and one is orange. There was a real char that had one gray and one orange thread in it. And so all of these are actual samples. And I've still maintained the population logic in that we studied a lot more than 75 fish. I don't know, like 200 and almost 300 fish. So these individual fish are the correct representation. So if you take the FO of this, it's still the correct FO of the whole population. If you look at the percentage of fish from each of these places and each of these seasons and it's still the correct sort of, so this does stand in for the population, even though they are individual fish. And people really like this graphic a lot. They made a poster of it and put it in a lunchroom. That's how much they like this graphic. And part of the reason is that there's so much information there. And I have not overdetermined what to know about plastic ingestion by fish because I still don't really know. I still don't really know exactly what they want. And I bet there isn't something that is exactly what they want. I bet different people want different things. And again, because Inuit are numerically literate people, and a lot of them are fishermen, and anyone who does commercial fishing is extremely data literate because you have to keep so many logbooks and you basically make a data set that they read this. The other thing that was really important for Liz and for other people in the not civic government is this really showcases the zeros. So there's a lot of fish that obviously didn't eat plastic, and the majority, you can eyeball it and you can see like most of these are filled in black. They're not full of plastic, and even when they have a plastic, it's still mostly black. And because one of the main messages they wanted was that wild food is safe to eat, which is one of our findings. So it shows the zeros better. It shows the main message better. There's more information, season, location, type of plastic, that's all in there. The one thing that isn't in here that the infographic couldn't tell very well was the size of the plastics that we found. And that was actually really important because if you listen to the media, it sounds like plastics are choking things. And we found 0 chokes in this data. The plastics we found were always very, very small. And almost all of them were smaller than a grain of rice. So I made this graphic, which nobody except for me loves, which is fine. They didn't make a poster of it, but they didn't reject it either. So this is, the bottom is the size, the longest size of all the plastics, and then this is the second longest size of the plastics. There is also a third size of anything that is, anything that's 3 dimensions, but we just had 2 because it's a 2-dimensional graph. So these are all the plastics that are small, as small as the point of a crayon. This is a grain of rice. Ooh, there's a grain of rice. This is a Tylenol. This is a dime. And you can see the vast majority of things are smaller than a grain of rice. And when they are larger, they're only large in one direction. It means they're long and skinny, like a fishing line. And this became a very important part of our communicating wild food is safe to eat because it meant that there weren't a bunch of plastics tangled up in animals, blocking them or anything like that. And so one of the problems that started developing is like, okay, what is a scientific way? Because we're still hired as Western scientists. What is the Western science way of saying wild food is safe to eat when we're looking at these small plastics in fish? And so I developed, well, basically a new proxy because there's a gap from a Western science perspective between the plastics in the guts and fish are okay. And we're not doing a toxicological study. This isn't chemistry. This is physically, the plastics are small and it's not causing harm. So we made a new metric as a proxy for the fish are okay. Our novel method is currently called the Inuktitut metric. A knot shot is Inuktitut for can be pooped. So the logic behind this, I've never presented this metric before, by the way, everyone. So please give me feedback on how this is going. I'm a little bit nervous. So this is our poopable metric. The argument I wanted to make was animals poop naturally, and that is good. So if an animal can easily poop a plastic, that is good. And so if you're developing something quantitative around that to measure and prove that, what you want to measure is the asshole of the animal. There are reasons you don't do that. Feasibility reasons, ethical reasons. So we needed a second proxy. So what we did is we found all the hard parts in an animal. And now I'm realizing this just sounds like horrible sexual innuendos all the way down. These are real scientific terms. Hard parts is a diet analysis term for the things that any animal, including humans, eats that aren't digested and stay hard the entire way through the gut. So this is for, not said as seal, right? So this in a seal, this is the exoskeleton of shrimp, bunch of rocks and shells. So seals eat rocks all the time to help them get parasites out of their guts because it scrapes the little sides of their guts and it gets the parasites out. So they eat rocks on purpose. And so I measured a bunch of these hard parts, which were sort of average-ish size, and then the plastics were smaller. And so I could make a scientific quantitative argument that we had poopable plastics and the seals were okay. So that's the case study, sort of moving through basically from frequency of occurrence to an upshot as our main metric of plastic ingestion in animals. That gets closer and closer to community needs. I don't think any of them nail community research questions, again, because of the incommensurability problem. So when you're dealing with incommensurable knowledge systems, which is sort of like, what are the Inuit knowledge systems, Inuit research priorities, which I still don't completely understand, and I never will completely understand, and completely understanding them is not my goal. Commensurate knowledge systems, sort of like paradigms on steroids. The best you can do is not integrate, impossible, but negotiate. So what Liz and I constantly negotiate is the best fit between these knowledge systems, between the proxy and the thing, and we're constantly negotiating it. So it's not an integration, it's a negotiation. So things you need for a negotiation, any kind of negotiation, you need action to address power differences. So not equality where everything's treated the same, but equity that addresses differences. Because you want to maintain those differences. You don't want to conflate them because that is rude. And then if you do that, you've missed the power differences. You want really clear shared decision-making power in a negotiation. In our case, we do facilitation instead of like leading. You want transparency, should be ongoing. It should be documented for third parties and for later. You need accountability. Accountability needs to be ongoing. It needs to be binding, right? And this looks a lot like what you would do in any kind of negotiation, but I'm actually talking about math. Again, still talking about math. So we have to build this into our math, into our math. So Liz has veto power over all my math, even though she doesn't do the math. And that is how Liz has veto power over everything in the project. These are her homelines, including math. For facilitation, we do participatory statistics. So the way participatory statistics work, if you think that speaking in public is nerve-wracking, try doing math in real time in public. Basically, we now come up with our raw data. So we clean the data to make sure it's data and not jankered up from a bunch of undergraduates having their fingers in spreadsheets. But we don't do any analysis until we're in community. And then we work together where they'll ask a question and I'll see what the stat says about this. And then they'll say, what about season? So Liz saying, what about season was the first time I did participatory statistics. I just didn't know what I was doing it and I wasn't very good at it. And what about this? And what about that? Doesn't seem true. Why not? Well, this, and then I recategorize and we basically do the analysis in real time in a community setting where only a couple of us do the statistics, but everyone does the statistics. The other thing is a lot of full-time paid hires from Nunatsiavut are in the project because processing a sample, gathering the sample, counting the things, there's lots of decisions that happen constantly. Ongoing communication, again, participatory statistics. So the entire analysis happens through communication rather than someone going to their statistics cave and doing the statistics and then bringing them back. That's no longer what happens. It takes forever. There's a ton of documentation. So we have a lot of metadata. So there's in spreadsheets, there's always something, well, there should be and rarely is something called metadata, which is information about how the data was created. For us, it's like who did it, how decisions were made, information about the participatory statistics and the processing, that sort of stuff. Huge amounts of metadata, hugely long captions on all of our visualizations is also part of that. Ongoing review is again through full-time hires and participatory statistics. And then very importantly, all the data is owned, controlled, and accessed by the Nunat Civic government. I do not own the data, even though I'm doing a lot of the typey typing. It's owned by Nunat Civic government. And that also helps with the power differences. I have to actually request access to the data sets that I have in my lab in order to do the statistics every time. So these are some of the things that enable the specific partnered negotiated relationships between the thing we are studying and the things we're using to study it, our proxy and the thing studied. Not my big brain and my stunning personality or my great ethics, infrastructure, right? You have to have infrastructure because again, with the paradigm on steroids sort of situation with the incommensurate knowledge systems and power relations, if we don't have this infrastructure, the stats will keep sliding into Western science, no matter how amazing I am. My amazingness is nothing in the power of colonialism. I think we all know that. So you require infrastructure to count across worlds. I will end with a couple of take-home messages. Ugh. Whoop. Oh yeah, good. If you are working across incommensurate knowledge systems, what you set out to measure or study or whatever will change, because of course your side of the knowledge system is wrong already. Indigenous knowledges and Western sciences never integrate, and you can put indigenous, there's many other things that aren't Western science that you can put in place in this, but they do relate to one another in better or worse ways, which is why I call it fit. So you're always on a quest for the best fit, and that is your methods. And finding a good fit requires infrastructure, not big brains and fantastic ethics, because they are insufficient to dominant paradigms. If you're really keen on this kind of stuff, like specifically this kind of stuff, there's a few resources. The first one is a video that myself and other people put together for graduate students about how to just write up when you've got local knowledge or community knowledge and quantitative research. This isn't indigenous knowledge, this is local knowledge. There's a blog post about averages. So one of the things you really have to do when you're going across knowledge systems is you have to know your own knowledge system really, really well. So I'm going to assume you all know how to do an average because you've been in or taught courses and you know what your average is for that class by looking at all of your test scores and averaging them, right? Do you know how averages are made? Do you know how to unmake one? Do you know what averages do and don't do to outliers or low counts or high counts or how they hide things and not possibly not. So part of going across knowledge systems is you need enough expertise to really know your own. And in this case, we had to do a deep dive into averages because they were not doing the work we thought they were doing. And so we had to be like, what is an average? If you're interested in participatory statistics, I am not the king of participatory statistics. Collaborative Impact is the king of participatory statistics, and they have kits there. And then if you're interested in community co-authorship and attribution, like the report that had 233 co-authors on it, we have a working group and one blog post, and soon we'll have more on that on our website. So thank you very much for your time and attention and listening to me talk about statistics.
Thank you very much for the talk. For the questions, for those in the room, you walk up to the podium, pick up the mic, and you speak to it. For those online, you can raise up your hands, we'll call you to speak, or you can type in the chat. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, it has to be in the mic, because if you're not in the mic, I cannot hear you.
Hi, Max. This is Zhong Yan Zhou, and this is Yan, and nice to see you again. This is an amazing talk, and I have a lot of thoughts